Hello everybody, welcome back to Dominions 5. We are starting a new Let's Play series. This is another multiplayer game. This time we are going to be playing as M.A. Man. So, as usual with these multiplayer games, I'm not sure in what order and at what time I'll be releasing the episode. So I'm recording it, of course, well in advance of when it will eventually be released because it's a multiplayer game, and so for obvious reasons, both to hide what I'm doing, but also not to spoil, also to hide what other people are doing. It's not cool to sort of release the content as the game is still being played. And so, let me talk about this game that we're going to be playing just a bit. This game was hosted by Lucid, who has a channel, Lucid Tactics. I think one of the best, just a fantastic Dominions games. He has Dominions 4 and Dominions 5 now content on there. Just really a fantastic channel, so you should go check that out. So he has hosted this game. It is a game that, for one thing, it involves a mod. We always play with like Worthy Heroes, but it also involves another mod, which is a mod that he has designed, which is called Lucid's Thematic Gem Gen version 1.5. This adds a couple of items to the game, which are temporary gem items. It is not too imbalanced. I do think that some of the items are quite powerful. They certainly do make life a lot easier. I think it makes things. It definitely opens up a lot of paths and makes access to some paths easier in some situations. So that is something to keep in mind. Anyways, the other thing is this game is a much smaller game than the other games that I've been playing. I mean, it's got 9 players or so in it. But, the other games that I was playing, like, for example, the TNT game that I'm playing in is an All Nations game, and I'm starting up another All Nations game soon. So those are like 30-player games. This is a much cozier and smaller kind of game. It was also intended for advanced players only, which I suppose I qualify as by the slimmest of margins. I think as you'll see, I am able to hold my weight. Yes, so another thing is this game has already been going on for quite a while. I was traveling and I was not able to record the first turn, so we're already sort of 30-ish turns into the game. And so the usual caveats apply, which is that although I will have better hindsight, it's harder to keep track of the diplomacy because a lot of it happens out of game. We'll do what we can. But at least I can tell you that, I think it is going to be a great Let's Play. There are some spectacular successes, and also some pretty painful failures. And I think both of those make for entertaining and hopefully educational Let's Play. All right, speaking of painful failures, M.A. Man. Yeah, so, actually, no. M.A. Man is not a terrible nation. It's not a great nation. I think it's really solidly in the middle of the pack. It's got some pretty good strengths. It's got some pretty severe shortcomings. I think the main thing that really strikes me in terms of M.A. Man is that there isn't like a clear winning strategy, or I guess that's not quite the right way to put it. Like, there isn't a strategy that you can choose that if the opponent doesn't really counter it well, then you will win. So, for example, it's not like you have a great bless unit, like maybe, you have giants with a regen bless that are just really hard to deal with, or just like a great sacred unit in general, right? Man doesn't have a good bless strat, really. So there isn't like a special magic path that's just like really scary. They don't have like a I win button, whether it's easy to counter or not. Anyways, let's go into the nation, and we'll do a bit of a nation overview, and then we'll talk also about the other nations in the game, and we'll talk about a pretender, and yeah, all the usual stuff. So let's talk about the units. Man's units are some of them are useless, but overall they're very strong. I think they have quite a strong conventional army. Again, with some limitations. A slinger is completely useless. We will never talk about him again. The longbow is perhaps the most famous unit of MA Man, and it is of course fantastic. Longbows have extra range. They do quite decent damage for a bow. Most regular bows do like kind of 9 damage. These do 12. They come with precision 12 without any buffs, and they are really cheap. They only cost 7 resources, a few recruitment points, but that's okay. So 10 gold, 7 resources. These are like fantastic archery. They're not armor piercing, but they fire every turn, long range. They're just an amazing archery unit. And they even have they have a short sword. Like they're not, after they shoot all their arrows, they got to go up in melee, and it's not a terrible weapon. Okay, so longbow. Let's skip a few of these guys and continue talking about archery. There's another archer that's very worth mentioning, and it is the forester. The forester, almost same recruitment cost, 12-7, a bit more recruitment points. This is a short bow, not a long bow, but also has precision 12. However, this guy is stealthy, and for extra fun, has a patrol bonus, and is also ambidextrous with an axe and a dagger. These guys, also, they can be recruited in forests without a fort. These guys are also really good. So less damage and range than the longbows, but you can recruit them outside your forts, and stealthy. Like, you can do a lot of damage with stealth squads of these. Plus, ambidextrous dual wielding guys, if you're fighting against giants, now we're not fighting giants there are no giants in this game, but this stuff, they just melt giants, right? Because dual wielding is very good in certain circumstances. So these are not often thought about. These are very strong units, and it's easy to overlook them in Man's lineup. Okay, let's look at Man's infantry. Man's infantry is terrible. So we have these spearmen. You start with these guys. They're just bad spearmen. The long spear is almost interesting because, long weapons for repel, but the chassis is just so weak that they're just kind of bad. And it's not even a length 5, it's just a length 4. So, yeah, pretty bad. And then these infantry are just bad. Javelin with an axe for 15 resources and barely any protection. And then here you have this is supposed to be your heavy infantry, but these are garbage. So they have bad infantry. It even says, in the description, the infantry of man is limited and lacks heavy troops. Yeah, no shit. So bad infantry. However, we have fantastic cavalry. So the standard Knight of Man is sort of the epitome of heavy cav. It has, obviously a high resource cost, not too expensive on the gold. So it's expensive, but you're getting what you pay for. We have high protection, high defense, and the usual 3 attacks, 2 attacks per turn, plus the lance charge. Just a very solid and respectable heavy cav. And more importantly, we have the cap only, unfortunately not a sacred, but which I guess is good because you can recruit as many as you want, but they're so expensive you can't recruit that many. Still, a more expensive version, but these actually are extra worth it because they have an extra attack per turn, and it is a magic attack. I guess it's the unicorn. These are unicorn calves, so people call them unicav. And for some reason, they have recuperation, so they lose afflictions. Okay, whatever. I don't know why. These aren't sacred. I guess. I don't know why. But these are amazing. Yes, they are expensive, but they're just fantastic units. 3 attacks per turn is just very strong. Now, they're amazing, I'm saying, compared to the rest of Man's troops. any sacred is going to be, not any sacred, but like this chassis plus sacred is going to be better, right? Or like, for example, if you compare to Tianqi has heavy cav with the bless. The heavy cav chassis itself is weaker than this one, but with the bless, it's going to outshine this any day of the week, right? These 3 attacks per turn are just begging for a bless, but you can't give it a bless, right? They're not sacred. Still, they are a very strong unit. In particular, they're very good for expansion. And, against an average sacred, they will actually hold their own because of the high defense, high protection, decent hit points for a human chassis, and just 3 attacks per turn. So, pretty good unit. There's a recruit anywhere Logrin cavalry, which is pretty average. They have javelins and just this. They're okay protection, okay defense. They're pretty average. Okay, so overall, if we look at the lineup for the troops, it looks pretty good, right? We've got amazing archers, and we've got amazing heavy cav. Not such good infantry. Let's talk about the sacreds. Or let's not talk about these sacreds. These sacreds are heavy infantry with no shield and bodyguard and like stealthy. Like, I don't know what this is trying to be. You can see that maybe there's some kind of thing where you go stealthy troops with like the stealthy sacreds and the foresters and like maybe a stealthy commander or something like that. But this is just a bad chassis for I'm not saying it's impossible to make this work. There are blesses here that would make sense. Maybe like an awe bless, because fire is nice to get as man. So if you're playing a blitz or a short game, then maybe something like awe and an awake fire dragon might be a thing. But that's like for early game fights. They're gonna get killed by magic, right? So I don't know what you do with these sacreds. They're bad. We're not making them. So the last thing I want to say about the troops is, as far as conventional human troops go, they're very good. But the problem is they're conventional human troops. So we have no resistances, no special abilities whatsoever, no berserk, no they're just humans, which is like the enduring theme of this nation. They're just humans, right? So they have nothing special. So troops, definitely some very good things, but also a lot of shortcomings. Let's take a look at the commanders. All right, we have a scout. Now, the scout is interesting because he is more expensive than the usual scout, but he has leadership. He has leadership 10. And I think the idea here is that he can lead a small party of foresters and go be a jerk behind enemy lines, which is, totally a thing. So we do have this scout. Your regular commander is leadership 80. However, he only has, and so that's always a good thing, but he only has map move of 12. I guess the other thing I should have mentioned is that, generally speaking, because you're relying a lot on these cavalry, for example, well, at least the strategy we're going to be playing, we're going to be taking scales and making some of this cavalry. Man has actually very good map mobility, and this commander is like the slowest mover of them all, because we're not making any of this slow infantry. We're making cavalry and longbows, and even longbows have map move 14. So this guy's very slow. So actually, I'm going to be leading most of my troops with other leaders, but still, he's a good leader. He has leadership 80. Then we have the monk. The monk is very interesting. He is basically, in some ways, your scout, because he's stealthy and only costs 25 gold. He is also your priest, an H1 priest, and he can do divine research, which is basically, he only has research of 3, but he doesn't cost a lot, and you can build 2 per turn, and you can have as many of them researching in a province as you have candles. So they can be used for scouting, they can be used for research, they can be used for actual like priest duties if you're fighting against undead. So quite a good unit all around. The bard is a spy and nature 1 mage, kind of a bit of a weird mix, but when you need a spy, you've got one. Otherwise, you don't really need to make these because we have better nature mages. Let's before we go into the magic, let's just look at the other troops. We have the commander version of the sacred, which is like makes even less sense because now he's got 2 broadswords and he's ambidextrous, and I like what is going on here. This is bad. And then we have a commander version of this cavalry, which is actually a pretty good commander. Leadership 80. And this is just, and this, you might actually be able to thug this chassis out because, this is something you can work with. Cap only, but I kind of prefer working with these instead of these guys because they move faster and so they can really zip around from one end of your kingdom to the other. Now, that may or may not be important in the game you're playing, but sometimes it can be important. Okay, before I talk about the magic paths, I should also mention that we have cheap temples as man. And so the temples plus the monks means you can get a lot of monks up really quickly. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting strategies that can come from that. So magic. Man gets a gem income of nature and air, and their mages are mostly nature and air. The magic paths are not... It's, again, a mixed bag, and we have to talk about spell singing in just a minute. So the cheap mage is nature 1 and either nature or air. Nature 2 is very good. Nature air is situationally useful as well. So this is not a terrible, just regular cheap mage. Also, what's nice is the mages are sacred, so they don't cost as much upkeep. Then we have the slightly more expensive Recruit Anywhere mage. This one can be good and can also just kind of be useless because it's nature 1 with 2 randoms. So the best that you want is air 2 because then you can do like air evocation like lightning. Nature 3 is also useful for a lot of nature spells. And you can sometimes get some magic diversity with these ones. But often you end up with like air 1 nature 2, which is just like a more expensive version of this one that's not much more useful, so that's unfortunate. These are also priests, by the way. What's the other interesting thing about the mothers instead of the daughters is the mothers actually have leadership 40 and stealth, so maybe these are the leaders that you would have leading your guys. I don't know. That's kind of the plan, maybe. You'll see. We're going to sidestep that entirely. And then we have a cat mage, which is unfortunate in so many ways. The cat mage is air 2 nature 3 with some chance at magic diversity here, but is old. Yeah. So the biggest problem really with man's magic is that clearly the biggest path is nature. But nature pairs best with earth, not with air, right? Because even the nature booster, Strength of Gaia, is nature 3, earth 1. So you have nature, but it's really hard to boost it during the fight, right? And then air is like, in order to do good air evocation spam, you want to have like air 3 at least, if not more, right? Because storm is air 4, right? And so only these crones, maybe only a lucky crone is going to, like, it's a waste. If you need a guaranteed air 2 mage, you're not going to recruit a bunch of cap onlys that are mostly, you're wasting like 3 out of 5 paths. Like, it's ridiculous, right? So they're like, they have air, but they're really inefficient and kind of bad at it. And they have nature, but they're not like super good at it either. So yeah, a very awkward kind of mix. Both nature and air are good magic paths, but the man doesn't quite do either of them very well. However, it's important that we talk about Spell Singer. and the communions that they can do. So Spellsinger was introduced in Dominion 5. A lot of people saw it as a nerf, which it kind of is. Spellsinger makes the spells cast more slowly, but they cost less fatigue. So that is a nerf, clearly. Usually it's more important to get the spells out quickly, and fatigue is easy to deal with. But they've coupled this with a new ability, which is that man can do nature-based communions. So just like normally communions are astral, but man can do it with nature. And so now you got to rethink all of this magic stuff from the point of view of all of these guys can communion together. So this is actually very interesting. Because now you can boost up your air and your water and your earth. Let's say you get on a mother, enough to do something, to cast all those spells that you need to cast, right? And you have pretty cheap basic mages that can be your communion. They're called chorus slaves, right? And chorus masters. So the communions, I think, open a lot of doors for MA Man. But it's still a tricky sell, because what are you communioning up? You're communioning up nature. Well, nature doesn't really need. I mean, there are spells that have high nature requirements, but by the time you're casting those spells, you have the boosters or whatever you need to cast them. So mainly, it's going to be used for air and for some of the other spells. Now, there is something interesting that you can do, which is you can communion up your mages, because your mothers and the crones are H1 priests, so you can communion these guys up to get high holy power. And so there are really cool things you can do. For example, you have access to like infinity H1 priests, because these guys are super cheap, right? Well, you can communion up a mother to get to H5 and then cast whatever that spell is called, which boosts let's is it in, where can we see? I don't even know what is it in blood. Where do they hide this is embarrassing. Where do they hide the holy spells? They're not visible here. Anyways, that spell that buffs all paths by 1, all priests by 1. So suddenly your infinity monks become infinity holy 2 monks. Very powerful against sacreds or against undead. So that's there are fun kind of gimmicks like that. I feel like there are a lot of gimmicks. Another gimmick is you have 1,000,000 stealthy priests, so you can just go and preach an enemy dominion, right? And you can like preach someone's dominion away with an army of stealthy monks. Spoiler alert, we are going to be doing a bit of that in the game. So there are a few like gimmicky things that you can do with this setup. It is not bad. Obviously, you're thinking nature mage, so like, mass protection. There are good battlefield buffs that go well with these troops. It's just there's nothing like amazing that stands out. Now, let's talk about who is in the game. Actually, before I go into my pretender design, it's going to be a bit of a long episode, but that's okay. Who is in the game? We have Scaleria. So we have our undead. So Scaleria is being played by Lucid, so that is scary because he's very good. But, hopefully, we have, I think MA Man can do okay versus undead with the monk spam, right? That could be a way to deal with it. We have Marignon. Marignon is is similar to Man. They have crossbows instead of longbows. They actually have sacreds. Like, they have sacred heavy cav, which we don't, so I'm very jealous. And they're like fire and astral. We're air and nature, they're fire and astral. Also Fun Nation. They don't have any... They have infantry with no shields. Oh, wait, no, that's a different age. They have these guys with shields. Whatever. It's Marignon. It's like a fire version of Man. Which is... And also, we also have Abyssia, which is just fire and blood and high protection. Yes, just fire. And so, ironically, we're a nature nation, right? And so nature thinking, oh, mass protection, right? Bark skin, yeah, but that makes you vulnerable to fire. And then these guys will just kill you. Oh, by the way, we also have Agartha. Agartha is mainly earth, but they can summon magma children, and so more fire to come at you. Also, I don't know if you're noticing a theme here, but Agartha, which is also a very high protection nation, plus they have these like statues that they can summon, which are super high protection. Like you saw, Marignon has high protection, Abyssia has high protection, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because man can't do shit against high protection because we don't have crossbows, we have longbows, so these arrows are just going to plink plink onto the statues and do nothing. And knights are going to charge and then try to fight statues with hooves, and yeah, bad news. So yeah, that's who we're fighting against. We also have Cetis. Cetis in MA has they have no archers, but they have skelly spam and poison, so that's something to deal with. Then we have there's one. I think that's it for the land nations, right? Pangaea. Pangaea, who also gets 200 gold temples. Pangaea is a nature earth nation, so they're like a real nature nation. They do nature, but for reals. And they have a bit of blood too, I guess. And so that's annoying, right? Because like it's not even we're gonna do nature, but they're gonna out nature us because they get actual more nature income than we do, so they can get things like Mother Oak up earlier if they wanted to. However, their troops are garbage. They have sacred centaurs, which are you could make a bless out of these, but they're kind of expensive in terms of gold. But whatever. They have kind of longbows too. Anyways, so we have Pangaea that can kind of like out nature us. And we have one water nation. We have Ys. And Ys, God, I hate Ys so much. Ys has these terrible, and by terrible I mean like awesome, the Movark Knights, or Morvark 'H Knights. These are very expensive but unbelievably good. These guys change, so they're just like an amazing high defense heavy cav with glamour, because of course, right? And sacred. And on land, they also get, and with a magic weapon. And then on land, they also have fire breathing. So again, more fire, right? These guys are just really, really tough to deal with. Every nation hates fighting against Ys. The nice thing is that Ys is, like, they'll raid your lands. And, of course, they have air and water. So these thugs can be, like, mist form, glamour, quickness, impossible to kill. Like, complete bullshit. These guys are really tough to deal with, and if they get on land, then they get these druids. Then they get Astral Earth, right, which is like the best cross path plus randoms, right? So very strong nation. Maybe their weakest point is that they have very shitty troops, except for their super sacreds, right? So the rest of their troops are really bad. I guess the land troops are okay. Once they get on land, they're decent, but the rest of their troops are really awful. So the trick for them is to keep them off of land, and also make forts, because they can't really siege you, because all they have are these amazing cavalry, but that's not good for sieging. Those are our neighbors. And so based on that, my strategy was hope I'm not next to Ys. I'm going to show you my pretender. I went with a rainbow pretender, a dormant rainbow pretender, for magic diversity, basically. Again, we don't really need a bless because we don't have good sacreds. So one option is to take an awake expander, but I have found that with the Unicav, I can expand just fine. So I want scales, and I wanted magic diversity. In particular, I want to have fire magic. Oh, there's one. This reminds me, there's something we didn't talk about, which is there's a mage that we have as man, which is a Logrian wise man. Sorry, I forgot to talk about this guy. He is a recruit anywhere, but you need a lab mage. This is not as good as it used to be in Dom 4 because it takes 2 turns to recruit these, but this is your only access to fire. And realistically, earth. But you don't often get earth 2s. So this is your only access to fire. So I just wanted to point that out. So, okay, now we can go back. So, yes, let's look at our pretender. You kind of need to have fire on your pretender so that maybe you fight with them and do flaming arrows that way, or you can at least forge the fire boosters so that you can put them on your little dudes, right? So you need fire. The rest here is just to be able to craft basic things, to site search. This is a rainbow pretender, so it's easy to get a little bit of everything and still have decent scales. I went with the minor kind of bless, which is we have inspirational presence, and this gives inspirational to our sacred leaders, which aren't our conventional commanders, but what it does mean is that our monks can now lead 40 troops. Our stealthy monks can now lead 40 troops and are inspirational. And our mothers are now inspirational, and so we don't really need to make our commanders. This is mainly just as it gives you a little bit of extra morale, and the monks, we're really going to use them to help move our troops around. It basically means that we don't have to spend cap turns. Like, we don't have to recruit commanders. We can use all our resources towards knights. Anyways, that's the idea. It's mainly to be gimmicky with the monks. And then Arcane Finesse gives more penetration. All of our casters are sacred. This is good versus undead if you're doing banishment spam, but it's also good for nature because there are a lot of nature spells like Charm later on, or that are basically MR checks. And so I just thought it'd be interesting to try that as a gimmick. Another option is range, right? In Astral would be like Farcaster. But like the air evocation has pretty good range already, so I don't think that's too important. In terms of scales, we don't need a lot of candles because we have cheap temples and a million priests, so that's not necessary. We take as much growth as we can afford. Now, I might have, when I built this pretender, I think I was feeling not so great about misfortune because I might have had I probably was sick and tired of getting bad events, but actually I would, if I had to remake this pretender, I would take more misfortune and increase these other scales. Maybe I'd take another growth or something. Order 1 and... growth is the best econ scale. The second best econ scale is productivity. It gives 4 to your income for each one. It's better than order. And plus, we need the resources for our knights. So this gives me... I did testing, and this was a good combination that allows me to get 2 knights on the first turn, no matter what. And that's basically all you need to get your initial expansion going. A bit of cold is fine. So yeah, those are basically our scales. And I like this chassis because, as for a rainbow, because you get the free... gem generation, the free astral gems. So yeah, that is the plan. That is the pretender. Judy Garland. Judy Garland is the singer from The Wizard of Oz, who sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and this is a rainbow pretender. Get it? Yeah. That was a connection there. Anyways, so that is it. This introduction video went on for a very long time, but that's okay. I don't know when we're going to release this, but I look forward to it and to recording the rest of the series. Next turn, I will see you in the game on the map, and we will start talking about our initial expansion. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next episode. Take care.